How's it going, everybody? Today I wanted to talk about a topic that I've been seeing a lot on various Facebook groups and Marvel Snap communities on certain tech cards and why we have them in the game. I've been seeing a lot of posts complaining about things like Shang-Chi killing 3 Hulks at one location and that it's overpowered, or Killmonger being able to counter an entire deck, or Cosmo, getting placed where Wong is and people instantly retreating. And people have been complaining about these cards and saying that they should get removed. And I wanted to explain to some of you newer players to Marvel Snap, or newer players to card games in general, why these cards are here. So before I get started, I have to explain what the metagame is. The metagame is the competitive state of a video game at any given point. And as a developer, you want the metagame to be changing and shifting constantly. You don't want it to get stale or solved and have 1 or 2 decks be the best decks that you can play. When this happens, when there are 2 decks that are the best, then the players that don't have cards to make those decks are playing less efficient decks and are losing constantly. And when they're losing constantly, they quit the game. The players that are playing these decks, they're playing against the same decks, they're playing the same decks, they get bored and they quit the game. So a stale metagame is bad for every game. And so what developers try to do is try to keep their metagame interesting. And there's 2 main ways that you can do this. The first way is to create a perfectly balanced game. A common example of this is rock, paper, scissors. Rock, paper, scissors is perfectly balanced. Anything you throw has a same percentage chance to win, and it's a balanced game. It gets boring because it's so simple, but it is a balanced game. Marvel Snap is a very complex game, and it's impossible to make it perfectly balanced. So what developers will do is the second way to keep the metagame interesting, and that is to introduce cards that hard counter specific deck archetypes. Cards like Shang-Chi, they hard counter high cost minions. Cards like Killmonger will hard counter zoo decks. Cards like Cosmo hard counters on reveal Wong decks, Enchantress, ongoing decks. So these cards are necessary to keep these types of decks in check. If one of these decks gets too powerful, let's say Wong on reveal deck starts getting too powerful and a lot of players start playing it, then players have the option to start playing Cosmo decks, and more Cosmo decks will come into the meta. They'll counter these decks, and the players that are playing the Wong decks, less of them will start playing because they keep facing counters, and they'll switch over to maybe something like a Dino deck that doesn't rely on reveal but is still big minions, and more of those decks will come into the meta. And Cosmo's not countering so many decks now, so less players will start playing that, and they'll start playing Shang-Chi decks. Shang-Chi decks will start coming on the rise and countering these Dino decks. So these Dino decks will switch to something that Shang-Chi is not so effective at, like Zoo decks. And Zoo decks will come on the rise, and then Killmonger, and so on. And so this keeps the meta interesting, it keeps the meta changing, and without these cards, just the strongest decks would stick around. And again, once the meta gets solved, it gets boring and players leave. So for the health of the game, these cards need to be included in there, and they need to be very powerful in certain specific situations while very weak in other situations. Shang-Chi, for instance, is very powerful if your opponent has a lot of big minions on one location, but if they're playing a zoo deck, your 4-drop 3 power is very weak. It's very slow. It's not very effective at all. So it has a very low floor, but a very, very high ceiling. And all these cards have to do that so they can counter very specific deck archetypes and keep them in check. So I just want to explain that for those of you new players. That's why they're in there. I know it sucks when you get wrecked by one of them, but it's part of the game and it keeps the game balanced. So that's it for this video. I just got back from vacation, so I'm going to be uploading more consistently. If you love all things Marvel Snap and video games, like and subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.